You think you're rational because you can read numbers. You tell yourself you're careful, that you only enter trades when the chart makes sense. But the painful truth is that when FOMO hits, your brain doesn't behave like a calculator. It behaves like a frightened animal that believes it will die if it doesn't run. Right now, FOMO doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like urgency. It feels like opportunity. That's why it wins. And once it wins, it turns your money into a leash. Welcome to the Hidden Self. In this episode, we're going to dismantle the story you've been sold about investing, wealth, and control. We're going to look at why the modern financial system doesn't just reward intelligence, it exploits emotion. We're going to talk about what happens when the information you receive is not meant to inform you but to steer you. We're going to talk about the difference between buying value and buying fear. And we're going to end with practical rules that protect you from becoming disposable liquidity. The moment you get tempted, here's what you need to understand before we go deeper. In a lot of people's minds, money is something you manage, like a spreadsheet you can correct, like a problem you can solve with better thinking. But money doesn't move inside your account the way it moves inside your nervous system. Your decisions around money are not pure logic. They are behavioral reflexes trained over years. And yes, FOMO is a reflex. It's not a charming personality trait, it's a survival protocol. In prehistoric life, if the tribe ran and you stayed behind, you didn't get a second chance. You became either prey or an orphan. So humans evolved to treat group movement as danger. That's how the species lived. Now the same mechanism is installed in a world where the predators are not lions. They're incentives, they're systems, they're institutions that know how to make your fear look like wisdom. Imagine a herd of gazelles on a savanna. If one gazelle freezes to analyze, that gazelle doesn't become a philosopher. It becomes dinner. In the old world, the rule was simple. Move with the pack or risk death. In the financial world, the pack runs too, and most people still believe freezing to think is harmless. They believe delay equals safety. But when fear is engineered, delay becomes punishment, and action becomes voluntary surrender. Here's the trap that keeps people stuck. The trap is not the stock price. The trap is the distance between what's real and what you think is real. You don't buy assets because you understand their fundamentals. You buy because you fear tomorrow. You fear your neighbor will be richer. You fear you'll look stupid. You fear that everyone else got the memo and you didn't. That fear creates a psychological prison, and the bars are gilded with hope and jealousy. And if you're watching this and thinking, I don't have that, let me remind you of something uncomfortable. You don't need to consciously admit jealousy. Your behavior will confess it. When you chase a rising price, even while your gut is screaming, this doesn't feel safe, that's not bravery. That's envy wearing a suit. Now let's talk about what the real game is. The financial markets you're taught to imagine are fairness machines. In reality, they're layered ecosystems. At the top are designers. At the top are banks, hedge funds, investment firms, and the people who can execute trades in fractions of seconds with systems that chew through data faster than you can blink. They are not primarily guessing outcomes, they are manufacturing conditions. For them, news isn't just information. News is a weapon. There's a brutal principle. The market moves ahead of the headline. By the time you read a shining article about miraculous growth, the party is already over for you. The early buyers already positioned months ago while you were still arguing online about whether it's too late. When the spotlight finally hits, what usually happens is not that a new opportunity appears. It's that sellers need liquidity. People like you, who feel late and desperate, provide the exit for those who were inside early. So when your phone lights up with euphoric updates and everyone starts talking about the same opportunity, that's not a sign you should buy. It's a sign you're being recruited. Let me show you a micro story that repeats constantly. Picture an office break room. Someone mentions a coin or a stock that went crazy this week. They say, I wish I bought earlier, but I'm getting in now. Two people nod. One person laughs and says it's a bubble. Then the bubble turns into a group story. The laughing person stops laughing. A week later, they're posting screenshots of gains. They don't understand the business. They just feel the social gravity pulling them toward the same decision everyone else already made. Then the price dips a little. That's where you see the true purpose of FOMO. It isn't about profit. It's about emotional survival. The person who entered because they feared missing out can't tolerate being wrong. So they do the classic behavior. They average down, they justify, they delay the moment of accepting loss. They keep buying while logic evaporates. Their brain is trying to erase an identity threat. I'm not the kind of person who loses. I'm not the kind of person who gets left behind. And this is where the information industry becomes a trap. Western media doesn't just sell data, it sells emotion. When indexes hit highs, programs don't obsess over risk. They chase the vibe. They invite guests who became millionaires overnight and talk about destiny like it's a financial product. They craft an illusion that anyone can do it except you, except the cautious one, except the person stuck waiting for proof. Here's the paradox of the information age. The more you know, the easier you are to steer. That doesn't mean information is useless. It means most of what reaches you has been processed to influence behavior. You don't receive raw data, you receive narrative. And narrative is designed to trigger the exact emotions that push you into decisions you'll regret. In investing, real opportunities often look boring and unclear. They come with uncertainty, skepticism, patience, and the discomfort of not being celebrated. When everything becomes crystal clear and everyone starts acting confident, price has usually already absorbed the optimism. The price you see isn't the start of a story, it's often the ending, and you're walking in after the curtain already fell. That's why inexperienced people suffer the most. They wait for confirmation. When confirmation arrives, it feels safe. It feels like it can't go wrong anymore. Then they buy at the worst possible time, when the emotional crowd is already inside at full volume. Meanwhile, those who were earlier are already distributing. When panic arrives, the newcomers don't just lose money. They lose identity, they lose sleep, they lose confidence. They become easier to control next time because trauma is a powerful teacher. Let's get even more psychological. You might think your money choice is about the asset. It isn't. Most of the time, your choice is about status. In consumer life, luxury goods aren't valued for their materials. A fancy watch isn't priced because of how much steel or mechanics it contains. It's priced because it creates desire in other people's minds. It creates a position. It creates a story about who you are. Financial markets function similarly, just with more camouflage. When FOMO dominates, price breaks away from real value. A company can lose money repeatedly, but its valuation can explode because people fear missing the next technological revolution. During these cycles, rational analysis gets shamed. People stop asking, does this company produce cash flow, and start asking, will the price go up tomorrow? This is when invisible hands move in plain sight. There are coordinated incentives that inflate price through buying pressure, through coordinated marketing, through staged narratives of scarcity and inevitability. You feel like you're choosing freely, but you're responding to manufactured temperature. The bait isn't a specific number. The bait is your feeling of urgency, and then the bait changes form. Once many participants have bought at high emotion levels, a controlled reversal arrives. It can be a sudden sell-off, a negative headline, a shift in liquidity. Suddenly, the mood evaporates. People panic sell to escape further loss. That is how money transfers. Your enthusiasm becomes their profit. You think you're participating. You're actually funding someone else's exit. Now you might ask, okay, but is there something I can do? Yes. The difference between surviving and bleeding out is not just having discipline. It's having a position. There's a reason professionals care about entry points, position sizing, and the psychology of holding. Price is just a number at a moment in time. Buying at 10 or buying at 100 could be irrelevant compared to where you are in the larger trend and how you entered. Position includes timing, volume, and psychological exposure. If your entry is solid, a normal fluctuation won't destroy you emotionally. You can watch the market wobble and your nervous system stays functional. But if you chase at the peak, you don't need a huge drop to panic. Even a small decline triggers the fear response. Your brain starts screaming, we're trapped. Then you make impulsive decisions like doubling down or exiting at the worst moment. So position is psychological armor. It protects you from the emotional explosion that FOMO creates. It decides your emotional capacity. And emotional capacity decides whether you can execute your plan instead of reacting to your fear. Now let's address a deeper layer. Why does envy and social comparison drive this? Because modern capitalism, especially in digital life, doesn't just sell products. It sells measurement. It turns assets into proof of worth. If you miss a trading opportunity, many people don't feel neutral. They feel inferior. They feel obsolete. They feel like time skipped them. That feeling can hurt more than the money itself. Money loss is physical, but status loss is existential. It attacks the part of you that wants belonging. So people chase. They chase not only profit, but belonging. They chase the feeling of catching up. They chase the moment where they feel included in the future. That is why FOMO can feel addictive. It gives temporary relief from shame and fear. It feels like you're finally participating in progress. But here's the brutal truth. The crowd's wealth during a hype cycle can be mostly imaginary. It can be like a musical chairs game. The music plays, everyone dances, people laugh, the chairs seem available. Then inevitably the music stops, and the number of chairs never matches the number of people. The ones without seats don't get a philosophical lesson. They get exposed. Experienced people don't just have superior knowledge. They have superior timing. They know how to step away while the mood is still loud. They accept missing the cheap thrill to protect survival. Because their priority is not entertainment. Their priority is staying alive in the game long enough to benefit when real cycles appear. Now we need to talk about why society pushes you into the casino in the first place. It's not just your personality. It's not just your insecurity. There is a financial structure that profits from constant activity. The global financial system is built on debt. When money is cheap and abundant, the system produces growth pressure. When growth pressure exists, governments, institutions, and markets create incentives that make staying still feel like a failure. People are told, implicitly and explicitly, that if you don't invest, you're losing. If you don't grow your wealth, you're falling behind. That's not education. That's coercion disguised as advice. And inflation does the quiet part. Even if your salary doesn't change, the purchasing power decreases. That forces many people into risk-taking. Not because they want to be traders, but because the alternative feels like collapse. They feel trapped between the humiliation of losing value and the danger of gambling. This is why FOMO isn't merely an individual psychological flaw. It's an outcome of a system that needs infinite growth on a finite planet. It needs consumers to keep borrowing and exchanging. It needs volume. It needs volatility, because volatility generates fees, spreads, commissions, and market opportunities for those who can withstand shocks. So yes, the system benefits. Banks and large corporations benefit the most. They need your capital to keep factories running and markets consuming. You become working bees, you gather honey diligently. But who owns the hive? The owners. So what does escaping look like? It looks like learning how to be outside the emotional traffic. In investing, missing an opportunity doesn't destroy you. It only destroys the account of someone who entered at the wrong time with the wrong mindset. A wise person doesn't fear being left behind. They fear being swept away by a flood. There's a difference. Being left behind means you missed a bus. Flood swept away means you got pulled into a current and lost control of direction. And the bus metaphor matters because opportunities repeat, especially when you understand cycles. The real skill isn't catching everything. It's riding the right bus with the correct plan. That requires patience, and patience is rare in a world that trains you to act instantly. Now here's where we become practical, but without pretending it's easy. You need rules that interrupt impulsivity, not motivation. One of the biggest ways FOMO attacks you is through speed. Information hits, dopamine surges, you act before your mind catches up. So you need a pause long enough for emotion to decay. Try the rule of 72 hours. The moment you feel an unstoppable urge to buy something because you're afraid the price will rise without you, separate yourself from all signals for 3 days. No social media debates, no watching charts every 10 minutes, no reading cheerleading threads that feed your dopamine. Just step away. In those 72 hours, the chemical intensity falls. FOMO is a short-lived brain reaction. If after 72 hours you can still articulate logic and real data, then you're making a decision, not a reflex. If you can't, then you weren't investing. You were chasing relief from fear. The second rule is the opposite of what most people do. Find solitude in decision-making. In markets, crowds are often wrong precisely around turning points. When everyone agrees, the agreement has often already been priced in. So if you want different results, you need different thinking. Don't seek validation from people who profit from you feeling hopeful. So social comfort is a dangerous illusion. It feels like safety because you're together. But safety in a hype cycle is often just delayed pain. Practice buying when the crowd is terrified, and selling or acting when others are euphoric and confident they've become geniuses. This is old law, and only a small percentage has the courage to use it. Not because it's complicated, but because it violates the ego's hunger for belonging. Ask yourself every day a brutal question. Am I buying because I understand the asset's value? Or am I buying because other people are buying and I want to stop feeling stupid? The third rule is competence. Reject ignorance. Don't invest in anything you can't explain to a 10-year-old in plain language. Not in a technical way, in a causal way. How does it make money? What forces drive its price? What's the mechanism, and what would make the mechanism fail? If your explanation is just, it's going up because people are buying it, you're not investing, you're gambling. The system counts on you not being able to name the mechanism. It uses jargon to shrink your confidence. It makes you feel small, so you outsource thinking to experts. Don't outsource your mind. Keep it simple. Only play on fields you understand, the fields where you can assess risk without needing permission from a talking head. And you need a fourth truth even if the script doesn't list it. You must stop trying to capture every opportunity. The market is full of cheap chances designed to drain your money. Wealth doesn't come from collecting more trades. Wealth comes from focusing on fewer, high-conviction setups you can defend under stress. Now, we have to go even further, because FOMO doesn't only come from price charts. It comes from scarcity narratives. People assume scarcity is natural, like supply and demand. But scarcity is often designed. The modern financial order doesn't always wait for scarcity to happen. Sometimes it engineers conditions that create the sensation of scarcity. So you feel like you must act before you're excluded. Think of the West's financial empires like operators of massive dams. By controlling the valves, they decide which fields get water and which fields get dry. In financial terms, they decide liquidity flow. They can inflate conditions, then drain them. And each shift targets the crowd's psychology. They run a double punch. First, they create abundance. Then they create scarcity. The crowd experiences both as confusion and urgency. When abundance happens, money becomes cheap and asset prices rise, creating a sense that opportunity is limitless. When scarcity arrives, the same assets become unaffordable, and the frightened crowd tries to survive by selling. The point isn't that the system is merely broken. The point is that the system has functions. It has features. One of them is to transfer assets from weak hands to strong hands during shocks. If you look at financial crises, there is often a pattern. In a crisis, huge amounts of money are pumped into the system. Interest rates drop toward nothing. For large institutions, liquidity expands. For ordinary people, inflation and future devaluation quietly degrade their purchasing power. Your money feels like it's dissolving in your pocket. That fear is FOMO's younger sibling, fear of losing purchasing power. Then comes the temptation phase. With cheap money floating around, assets jump. Stocks, real estate, crypto, anything that can be priced upward starts trending. Media outlets push stories about rare cycles and unbelievable returns. You start believing that the window closes fast. You start believing the next moment is the final chance. Then comes the withdrawal phase. Once the crowd has piled in with borrowed money and optimism purchased at peak emotion, rates rise and liquidity tightens. Money becomes scarce again, and debts become real burdens. Prices fall. Those who entered early can step aside. Those who entered late must sell to survive. So the designed scarcity becomes a transfer mechanism. It accelerates cleansing. It removes weak participants and concentrates assets among those who never panicked because they had reserves. You might wonder, why do some asset managers get richer during the worst crises? Why do large entities keep winning while regular people drown? It's because they can use designed scarcity. They don't only protect themselves, they buy at distressed moments. They transform panic into acquisition. They don't rescue the crowd. They exploit the crowd's forced choices. In property markets, for example, large funds can purchase large shares of inventory during downturns. They don't always flip quickly. They hold. And when enough ownership concentrates, real scarcity appears, not because land disappeared, but because access got restricted. Young people discover a new reality. Renting becomes permanent, ownership becomes distant, and housing becomes a luxury category even when the original purpose of housing was basic survival. This is how scarcity becomes psychological control. It's not only about assets, it's about freedom. Scarcity makes you feel like you have no options. It makes you feel like you must comply with whatever is offered. It makes you feel time is running out, and when time pressure and fear dominate, people trade long-term thinking for short-term relief. Now I want to expose the propaganda layer. Because the scarcity narrative doesn't arrive as a lecture, it arrives as language. During a hype period, media uses phrases that create excitement and inevitability. Breaking news, historic run, institutional adoption. The words themselves are dopamine triggers. They make you feel behind if you don't join. They shame restraint. They treat caution as ignorance. During a crash, the language changes. Suddenly, the narrative shifts to liquidity stress, insolvency risks, cascades, tightening conditions. The fear becomes a survival story, and then another type of scarcity appears. Scarcity of hope. You're told the world is about to end, and the only way to survive is to do what everyone is rushing to do. But what they are really selling is the same thing, your action. Your panic becomes someone else's liquidity. Your forced decisions become someone else's acquisition price. So how do the psychological traps work? Let's talk about loss aversion, because it's one of the most reliable human weaknesses. There's a painful principle from psychology. Losing money hurts more than gaining the same amount feels good. Some studies show the emotional pain of losing a certain amount can feel roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining that amount. The brain is wired to avoid loss more aggressively than it pursues equivalent reward. So when you enter a hype trade, and then the price drops slightly, your brain interprets it as danger. It doesn't interpret it as volatility. It interprets it as threat, and then it tries to undo the threat by doubling down, lowering your stop, postponing your exit, rationalizing and staying inside the illusion longer than your plan. This creates the looping behavior people call golding or gom in Vietnamese. It means you hold and justify and suffer, not because it's rational, but because the pain of realizing loss is unbearable. You'd rather endure uncertainty than accept the emotional cost of being wrong. Then the market drops further. The loss becomes too large to manage emotionally. At that point, the trapped investor does the same thing in reverse. They panic sell at the bottom because the fear is now stronger than the hope. So both ends are controlled. If you hold, you bleed. If you exit badly. Either way, you donate money. This is the mousetrap. It's designed around your nervous system. It's not designed around your skill. It's designed around predictable reactions, to loss and to missing out. Now let's talk about the biggest awakening most people resist. The things you fear missing are often things you don't actually need. Most of the opportunity hype is a form of identity performance. It makes you feel like you're part of a winning future. But winning futures are not guaranteed. And the version of wealth that matters is not the screenshot. It's the ability to stay solvent long enough to compound intelligently. If you step back and look at survival through major crises, the people who become genuinely wealthy are rarely the best day traders chasing headlines. They're the ones who can watch the crowd panic without turning it into personal humiliation. They have enough emotional distance to remain functional. They aren't seduced by the cheap drama of being right on time. What they understand is that real value doesn't require a knife fight. Real value doesn't demand urgency like a scammer. If an asset truly creates durable value, it doesn't need you to abandon caution tomorrow morning. It will survive skepticism. It will survive slow thinking. Scarcity designed for your fear is usually a sign that someone needs your money quickly. So what is the reaction? The reaction is to retain optionality. Optionality looks like having a reserve. It looks like holding enough cash and liquid assets that you can survive a downturn without forced selling. That means your nervous system stays stable. It means you don't have to obey the system's schedule. People mock you for being cautious in euphoric cycles. They call you outdated, they call you slow. But when the cycle turns, mockery disappears and relief appears. Liquidity becomes power. Cash becomes the crown that gives you choices. The greatest financial freedom isn't having a mountain of money. It's not being forced to act against your interest. It's being able to wait. It's being able to say no. In a crash, those with reserves don't have to sell assets at fire sale prices. They can buy selectively when panic destroys valuation. And even that is not the full answer. The system can steal money. It can manipulate markets. It can't easily replace skills, health, and trustworthy relationships. In a deeper sense, those are assets. They don't vanish in a market shock. They don't get liquidated by an algorithm. They don't get absorbed by an institution during a crisis. So invest in what can't be seized by a design scarcity. Invest in your health so you can think under stress. Invest in skills so you earn without needing to gamble your future. Invest in real relationships so you're not emotionally dependent on crowd approval. Now let's address time. Scarcity narratives attack time perception. They make you feel delayed. They make you feel like your life will be ruined if you don't act now. But economic cycles often last years, not hours. A typical cycle may run 7 to 10 years. Your patience cannot be measured in days on your phone. It must be measured in years and in personal capacity. Living in real time means resisting the emotional weather forecast created by media and influencers. It means noticing the difference between fake excess and real scarcity. When everyone is shouting about gains, that is often fake excess. When nobody wants to talk about risk, that is often real scarcity of wisdom. When you notice